Welcome back to Blue Collar Strength. My name is Jammer. I'm the working man's personal trainer. That's right. I'm getting it done week in, week out, working for you. I'm working for you, truck driver. I'm working for you, backhoe operator. I'm working for you, single mom. Okay, somebody is pulling for you, and I'm cutting through all the BS, trying to get down to common sense where it converges with science. Okay, so you can take this information, you can run with it, meet your goals, beat your goals, and exceed the competition. And today it's going to be all about stretching. Okay, there's lots of ideas and thoughts on stretching, when to stretch, how to stretch, when not to stretch. And today we're going to talk about the importance of stretching, how to do it, and when to do it. Okay. So what I want to start off is there's been a lot of discussion, and there seems to be research to validate not stretching before you train. Okay. This is the reason behind this is they say that it robs power. Okay. And I can't find any reason to disagree with the research or their findings. It seems that if you stretch before you train, you do lose power. However, I believe there is a big exception to this rule, and that is if you have mobility issues. If you cannot train through a proper range of motion because of muscle imbalances, the fact that certain muscles are too tight to allow you to train a certain way and train properly with proper form, then those muscles should be stretched. The restricting muscles should be stretched. What comes to mind is those with shoulder issues. This is not going to be universal, but this is going to be 80% of the time that guys who have been training for a while and work hard for a living have tightened up, and they have pulled forward and they have pulled down, and there are muscles that have tightened up that should be stretched before they train that will allow them proper motion. If you've tightened up and tightened down and have that sort of shoulder pain, that's called upper cross syndrome. Okay, basically the muscles of your chest and your pec minor are very strong, and the muscles in the backside, the rotators, the lower traps, and the rhomboids have loosened up, making it very difficult for you to set your shoulders or keep your shoulders in a proper position under a load. Okay, so in my case, and in the case of many of you, it may be a good idea to stretch out that chest, to stretch those pec minor, and to stretch the trap. All those muscles, okay, are so tight, they're keeping your scapula from moving properly. So if you're going to do any sort of pressing on a day, and you have that sort of impingement and restriction, then you should be stretching so that you can use the proper range of motion. Okay, it makes no difference if you can train hard and train heavy. Okay, if you only end up getting hurt. So whenever I train pressing movements, chest and shoulders, okay, I will stretch out my traps, just tugging my head to the side, stretching. I will stretch out my pecs using a doorway stretch, and then I'll use a piece of PVC pipe behind my arm to try to rotate my and stretch that pec minor. That pec minor is very restricting. It's a group of small muscles that run underneath your pectoralis major. It attaches to your rib cage, okay, and it pulls your arm forward, preventing you from having full rotation, preventing you from being able to get that scapula to set up and in, okay? So in the case that you might have some sort of restriction, another one that I'm thinking of now is people with tight hips, okay? Sumo deadlifters, talking to you, okay? Stretch those hips out, okay? What you want to do is stretch the muscles that are tight, okay? You don't want to, and this is universally across the board in every situation, don't stretch muscles that are already loose, or you'll continue to have the same problem. Let me give you an example. If you keep pulling hamstrings and having hamstring cramps, okay, you want to find out if your hamstrings are loose and your quads are tight, because generally that's going to be the case in weightlifters and bodybuilders. All right, it's often the case in any sort of athlete. Their quads are so tight, it outpowers the hamstring, and the hamstrings can't slow that lower muscle down and provide the proper balance, and they are weak and they cramp from being overworked. Okay, so if you can bend over and touch your toes, okay, but you can't grab your ankle and touch your ass, then you have really tight quads and really loose hams. Okay, so you don't want to stretch your hamstrings, you want to stretch your quads. Okay, if you stretch them equally, then you're going to continue to precipitate the problem. When I was talking about stretching your chest earlier, okay, you don't want to stretch the muscles that hurt, okay? So if you're getting little knots in your rhomboids and your teres major and minor are all cramped up, those aren't muscles that you want to stretch. They're already too loose. They're already working too hard. They need to be massaged out, and then they need to be strengthened and tightened so that they actually shorten, while the muscles on the front that are too tight need to be stretched out. Okay, so only stretch the muscles that are tight. Okay, now that is before you train. After you train, okay, I like to stretch those trained muscles. If you don't have an injury, then feel free to stretch any and all muscles that you train that day, because that is going to lead to recovery. Okay, as you can stretch it out till you train it again. So if you hit legs on Monday and you don't train them again till the following Monday, continue to do some stretching each day, because that will promote recovery. Now, if you have an injury or you're fighting some sort of muscle imbalance, that would be an exception to the rule. Okay, as for me, I have the show muscles are all tight, so whenever I train them, okay, I do additional stretching to try to stretch those muscles out, promote recovery. I don't stretch my weak muscles, okay? So basically, I'm not stretching my hams, I'm not stretching my glutes, but what I am doing is stretching my quads, I'm stretching my front hip flexors, I'm stretching my chest, I'm stretching my pec minor, okay? I'm stretching all those things that throw my body out of posture, okay? If you have good posture and you don't have these sorts of issues, then whatever you train, I recommend you stretch it at the end of your workout. How do we stretch? Okay, well, there are two types of stretching, and that is your sort of dynamic stretch where you'll swing a small weight, okay, or your static stretch where you simply put constant pressure on the muscle. I would say for most people who don't have an injury, then I would say the swinging the weights, using that dynamic, okay, sort of stretching to increase that range of motion is going to be most effective for you, and I would recommend that at any time. If you have an injury or you're talking about post-workout, I would take Kelly Starrett's recommendation and I would stretch each muscle for 2 minutes. Okay, the reason for 2 minutes is that the muscle has a defense mechanism and it's going to prevent itself from overstretching. Okay, and it's going to take you around a minute or so of constant, easy pressure, just steady pressure, okay, to get your muscle to relax till you can actually find a new range of motion. If you stretch long enough over the course of a week or so, you'll start to sense this phenomenon and you will realize when you are actually getting into the stretch of the muscle. Okay, 10-15 seconds is really not enough to get that stretch and defeat that defense mechanism, cause your nervous system to relax and get an enhanced stretch. Okay, so to sum this all up, okay, if you have an injury, okay, then I recommend static stretching those tight muscles before you train. If you don't have an injury, then there's nothing wrong with doing the dynamic sort of stretching before you train. After you train, I recommend you stretch the muscle groups worked, okay, with your 2 minute stretch of each muscle group. That can be repeated right after you're done. It can be repeated when you get home. It could be repeated on a daily basis, okay? Particularly for you guys and gals that are facing injuries and problems. The more you can stretch, the better it'll be, the quicker that will lead to a better range of motion, okay? So I hope you gathered and learned a little bit here today. Remember to like this video, subscribe to my page, go over to Facebook and like Blue Collar Strength. Go check out my blog, bluecollarstrengthblog.com. And for now, remember, it's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll.